The day the ships appeared in Earth's sky, the world stopped breathing. There were hundreds of them, massive vessels that blocked out the sun over major cities. They did not fire weapons. They did not make threats. They simply waited, floating in the atmosphere like patient teachers standing over a child's desk. Captain stood in the United Earth Command Center, watching the screens with a tight jaw. He had served in the Space Defense Force for 15 years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The aliens were real and they were here. "They're sending a message," said Park, the signals officer sitting at her station. Her fingers moved quickly across her console. "It's in multiple languages. They learned our broadcasts." The message was simple and clear. The Empire welcomed Earth to the galactic community. They came in peace. They wanted to help humanity grow and develop. They would share technology, knowledge, and protection. All Earth had to do was accept their guidance. The world's leaders gathered for an emergency meeting. Some wanted to fight. Others wanted to hide. But most understood the truth that saw in the data. They had weapons that could turn Earth to dust in minutes. Resistance would mean extinction. 3 days later, led a diplomatic team to the mothership. The aliens had invited Earth's representatives to discuss the terms of contact. As Shuttle approached the massive vessel, he felt small and insignificant. The ambassador who greeted them was tall and thin, with silver skin and 4 eyes that seemed to look through rather than at the humans. His name was impossible for human tongues to pronounce, so he told them to call him. "Welcome, young ones," said, his voice smooth and musical. "We are pleased to meet you at last." The way he said "young ones" made his teeth clench, but he kept his face neutral. This was diplomacy, not war. Led them through corridors of impossible technology. The walls seemed to glow with their own light. The air smelled sweet and clean. Everything was perfect, sterile, controlled. They entered a conference room where other officials waited. "Please sit," gestured to chairs that were slightly too small, as if made for children. "We have much to discuss about Earth's future." For the next 6 hours, and his team listened to the explain how the galaxy worked. There were thousands of species, organized into a complex hierarchy. The Empire sat near the top, guiding and protecting younger species. Earth would join as a junior member, learning and growing under supervision. "You must understand," said with what seemed like genuine kindness, "your species is very young. You have barely left your home planet. You fight wars over resources you cannot yet synthesize. You are like children playing with matches, and we cannot allow you to burn down the house." That would give Earth access to some technology, better medicine, cleaner energy, improved agriculture. But weapons development would be restricted. Space exploration would be monitored. All major decisions would require approval. "It is for your own good," assured them. "Many species have destroyed themselves at your stage of development. We will not let that happen to you." Nodded politely, asked careful questions, and took detailed notes. Inside, his mind was racing. They were treating them exactly like adults treat children who cannot be trusted with sharp objects. Back on Earth, reported to Director Lee, the head of Earth's Intelligence Division, was a quiet man with sharp eyes who had spent his career studying potential threats to humanity. "They think we're stupid," said bluntly. "Good," replied, "let them think that." Within a week, Earth's governments publicly accepted the terms. There were ceremonies and speeches about friendship between species. They seemed pleased with humanity's cooperation. But in a secure facility deep underground, assembled a team of the minds on Earth. Scientists, linguists, hackers, and intelligence officers gathered in secret. Park was among them. She had noticed something during the first transmissions that bothered her. Their encryption was strong, yes, but it followed patterns, predictable patterns, the kind of patterns that could be broken with time and effort. "They're not as careful as they should be," told. "They think we can't understand their technical communications, so they don't bother to hide them well." Smiled coldly, Then let's start listening. They had made a critical mistake. They assumed that because humanity was technologically younger, humans were also less clever. They broadcast their communications openly around Earth, never considering that the primitive humans might be able to intercept and decode them. Over the following months, Earth accepted the gifts with grateful smiles. Human children attended educational programs. Human scientists studied in facilities. Human leaders attended council meetings where they were patted on the head and told to trust their elder species. And the entire time, in hidden facilities across the planet, humanity was watching, listening, learning, recording every transmission, studying every pattern, analyzing every weakness. The thought they were teaching children. They did not realize the children had secretly taken the teacher's edition of the textbook and were studying ahead. Visited the mothership regularly over the next year, always polite, always grateful, always appearing slightly confused by the more complex technology. Seemed to enjoy explaining things in simple terms, speaking slowly as if might not understand. Each time returned to Earth with new information. The layout of their ships, the behavior of their guards, the casual conversations that revealed more than any official briefing. They're comfortable, reported too. They think we're harmless. Perfect, said, keep it that way. They treated Earth like a child, and Earth played the role beautifully. But behind innocent eyes, humanity was taking notes, and one day the test would come. 4 years passed since they arrived, and to anyone watching, Earth seemed content with its place as the galaxy's student. Human delegations attended schools. Human traders worked at markets. Human diplomats sat quietly at council meetings, nodding along to decisions made by older, wiser species. But in a bunker beneath the mountains of South Korea, sat in front of 6 screens, her eyes red from lack of sleep, and smiled at what she had just accomplished. "I'm in," she whispered. The encryption had taken her 8 months to crack. They used a rotating cipher system that changed daily, but had found the pattern. She was 26 years old, had graduated top of her class in mathematics, and had just broken into the civilian communication network. Lee appeared behind her, coffee in hand. "Show me." Pulled up the feed. Suddenly they could read messages in real time. Shopping lists, complaints about work, gossip about neighbors. It was boring, ordinary conversation, but it was in clear text. "They really don't think we can read this," said, shaking her head. "They're not even trying to hide it." "Why would they?" replied. "In their minds, we're barely capable of understanding our own technology, let alone theirs." Within weeks, his breakthrough spread to other teams. Earth now had access to civilian networks across 3 solar systems. The intelligence was overwhelming. Minyu worked in a different facility, one focused on educational broadcasts. He had spent 2 years pretending to struggle with basic science lessons while secretly recording everything the teachers said. They taught human students a version of physics. They claimed humans were not ready for the real formulas, but Minyu had intercepted broadcasts meant for children and compared them. "Their technology isn't magic," Minyu reported during a secure meeting. "It's advanced, yes, but not impossible to understand. They've been teaching us wrong on purpose, keeping us dependent." More disturbing was what else he found. The military was much smaller than they pretended. Most of their ships were old. Their weapons, while powerful, had not been significantly upgraded in decades. They controlled younger species through reputation and fear, not actual strength. "They're bullies," Minyu said, "and like most bullies, they're not as tough as they act." Across the Pacific, in a lab in Japan, engineer Sora Bay was taking apart a data pad. They had given these devices to human officials as gifts, loaded with approved educational content. Sora had different plans for hers. She worked carefully, documenting every component. The technology was elegant and efficient, but it was not beyond human understanding. In fact, Sora found several design flaws that human engineers would never have allowed. They've been using the same basic systems for so long, they've stopped innovating, Sora explained to her team. These devices have security holes you could fly a ship through. She rebuilt the data pad with hidden modifications, then returned it to normal use. Now it would record every signal it detected and send that information to Earth's intelligence network. Sora built 50 more and distributed them to human diplomats across the galaxy. The never noticed. Why would they check devices they had given as gifts? By the third year, Earth had observation posts hidden in 7 trading stations. Agent teams posed as merchants, janitors, and students. They placed tiny sensors in ventilation systems. They recorded conversations in public spaces. They mapped every ship that came and went. One agent, working as a cleaner on a station, discovered that admirals often discussed classified information in the station's dining area. They spoke freely, never imagining the human wiping down tables could understand their language. That cleaner's real name was, and he was a retired Special Forces operator with a gift for languages. He spent 6 months cleaning tables and listening to admirals complain about supply shortages, outdated ships, and political infighting. The intelligence he gathered was priceless. Dr. Han led the psychological analysis team. She read thousands of intercepted personal messages, watched hundreds of hours of entertainment, and built detailed profiles of their leadership. They're afraid, concluded. The empire is in decline. They control younger species to maintain the illusion of power. If species like us realized how weak they really are, the whole system would collapse. This explained everything. The condescension, the restrictions, the constant supervision. The needed to keep humanity small and dependent because equality would threaten everything they had built. Earth's secret war room filled with data. Maps showed supply routes. Charts detailed their military capabilities. Psychological profiles explained how their leaders would react to different scenarios. Humanity had become an expert on the while the still believed humans could barely read. But knowledge was not enough. Earth needed options. In orbital shipyards disguised as commercial facilities, human engineers were building ships. Not the slow, clunky vessels that had approved for limited human space travel. Real warships, designed using weaknesses that Sora had identified. The sensors operated on specific frequencies. Human ships were built to avoid those frequencies. Weapons had a reload time of 3.7 seconds. Human weapons were designed to fire continuously for 5 seconds. Shields were strong against energy weapons but weak against kinetic projectiles. Human ships carried both. Director coordinated all of it from his underground command center. He was 60 years old now, gray hair and tired eyes, but his mind was sharp as ever. "How long until we're ready?" asked General Park, head of space defense. "Militarily, we could defend ourselves now," replied. "But this isn't about war. It's about respect. We need to show them we're not children without giving them an excuse to attack." So when pressed? When they push too hard, when they demand too much, when we have no choice but to show our hand. Looked at the star map on his wall. They'll give us the opportunity. Bullies always do. They continued their patronizing guidance, completely unaware that every message they sent was being read, every ship was being tracked, every weakness was being cataloged. They saw grateful students. They missed the scientists taking notes on their outdated methods. They heard polite questions. They did not catch the sharp intelligence behind those questions. In council meetings, Captain Still played his role perfectly. He asked simple questions. He thanked them for their patience. He smiled when they explained basic concepts he had mastered years ago. And every night, he reported everything too. "They're getting comfortable," said. "Lazy even. They think we'll never be a threat." "Good," replied. "Let them sleep. We'll be ready when they wake up." 4 years of quiet watching. 4 years of learning. 4 years of humanity being underestimated while becoming the most informed species in the sector. They had made the mistake of assuming silence meant ignorance. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The message from the council arrived on a Tuesday morning. Ambassador Song read it 3 times, his face growing darker with each pass. "They want what?" President asked over the secure video link. "Complete surrender of autonomous weapons development," said slowly. "All human technology must be submitted for approval before implementation. They're also installing monitoring stations in Earth's orbit, supposedly for our protection." "When?" "They've already started building them." In his underground office, Director Lee received the same news. He sat back in his chair and closed his eyes. This was it, the moment he had been preparing for. "They're tightening the leash," said General Park, standing at the window, "testing to see if we'll resist." "More than that," replied. "They're getting nervous. Other species are starting to ask questions. The need to reassert control before their whole system cracks." They had called for a public ceremony to announce the new restrictions. It would take place on their mothership, broadcast across the galaxy. Earth's leaders were required to attend. Ambassador prepared for the ceremony with a sick feeling in his stomach. He was 53 years old, a career diplomat who had negotiated trade deals and peace treaties. But he had never felt as helpless as he did climbing the shuttle to the mothership. The ceremony hall was massive, filled with representatives from dozens of species. All of them were younger species, all supervised by the. Notice they all wore the same expression, resignation mixed with quiet resentment. The ambassador stood at the center of the stage. His silver skin gleamed under the lights. His 4 eyes scanned the crowd with satisfaction. "We gather today to celebrate Earth's continued growth under our guidance," began. His voice echoed through the hall. "However, recent observations have shown that humanity requires additional structure to ensure safe development." Stood with the other human delegates, forced to listen as listed Earth's supposed failures. Humans were too aggressive, too independent, too eager to develop weapons instead of focusing on peaceful advancement. "Therefore," continued, "the Council has determined that Earth must submit all technological development for approval. We will install monitoring stations to help guide your progress. This is not punishment but protection. We do this out of love for our younger brothers and sisters." The word love made one vomit. "Do you accept these terms?" asked, looking directly at. Every eye in the hall turned to the human delegation, felt the weight of it. He knew what had told him to say. He knew the plan. But standing here being humiliated in front of the galaxy made him want to scream. Instead, he bowed his head. Earth accepts the wisdom of the Council. The ceremony continued for another hour. Was required to stand on stage while explained, in simple terms, why humans needed supervision. It was like being lectured by a disappointed parent in front of the entire neighborhood. When it finally ended, returned to his quarters on the station. His hands shook as he poured himself a drink. A coded message appeared on his secure pad. It was from, "Well done, come home, it's time." Back on Earth, emergency meetings were already. The monitoring stations were being constructed in orbit, massive structures that would scan every ship, every transmission, every movement. "Once those are operational, they'll see everything," said Commander Park, head of orbital defense. "Our secret shipyards, our communications network, all of it." "Then we move before they're operational," said simply. "Move how?" President asked. Pulled up a star map. Red dots marked every installation, every ship, every communication relay they had been monitoring for 5 years. "We show them what we know," said. "All of it. We prove that we've been watching them as closely as they've been watching us." "That's a declaration of war," General warned. "No," corrected. "It's a declaration of equality. We're not attacking them. We're simply demonstrating that we are not children and we will not be treated as such. Dr. Park had prepared the data dump. Every intercepted communication, every decoded message, every recorded conversation. 5 years of surveillance, organized and ready to broadcast. This will humiliate them, said quietly. They have built their reputation on being the wise elders. If the galaxy sees that humans outsmarted them for 5 years, their whole power structure collapses. Good, said without sympathy. The plan was risky. They could respond with force. Other species might side against humanity for breaking the unspoken rules, but had studied the data, read the psychological profiles, analyzed every possible outcome. They won't fight, he concluded. They can't afford to. Their military is weak, their economy is struggling, and they're already dealing with unrest from other species. If they attack us, they'll expose their own weakness. But what if you're wrong? President asked. Met her eyes. Then we defend ourselves with the weapons we've been building in secret for 5 years. But I'm not wrong. They are bullies, and bullies fold when someone stands up to them. In orbit was positioning Earth's hidden defense fleet. Ships that were supposed to be slow commercial vessels were shedding their disguises, revealing weapons systems that had never approved. Satellites that looked like weather monitors were actually military-grade sensors. Everything is in position, reported. If they come at us, we'll be ready. Across the planet, humanity held its breath. The monitoring stations continued their construction, unaware of the storm gathering beneath them. Ambassador prepared for his return to the Galactic Council. This time, his speech would be very different. Captain reviewed his notes one final time. Engineer Sara armed the hidden transmitters she had placed throughout the network. Agent Minu confirmed that all observation posts were ready to relay information. Doctor sent her final psychological assessment too. Will react with outrage first, then fear, then negotiation. Hold firm through the outrage. The fear is where we win. In his office, looked at photos of his. He was about to gamble their future on 5 years of intelligence work and his belief that he understood them better than they understood themselves. No more bowing, he said to himself. No more pretending to be small. He picked up his communicator. Green light, initiate the broadcast. Across space, on every frequency, through every network, humanity's message began to transmit. Not a message of war, not a message of threats. A message that said simply, we've been watching you, we know everything, and we're done being treated like children. This comfortable world was about to shatter, and they had no idea it was coming. The Galactic Council chamber was designed to intimidate. It was enormous, with seats arranged in tiers that rose toward the ceiling. They sat at the top, looking down on everyone else. The younger species sat at the bottom, looking up. Captain walked into the chamber with steady steps. He wore his dress uniform, dark blue with silver trim. Behind him came Ambassador Song and a small team of human delegates. They took their assigned seats in the lowest tier. Watched them from above with his 4 eyes, probably expecting another boring session of humans nodding along to decisions. The council began with routine business. Trade disputes, territory negotiations, reports from various sectors, sat quietly waiting for his moment. His heart was pounding, but his face showed nothing. Finally, addressed the lower tiers. Do any of the junior species have matters to present? Stood, yes, honored council. Earth requests permission to speak. Granted, said with that patronizing smile. What troubles you, young friend? Walked to the center of the floor. Every species in the chamber was watching him. He could feel their eyes. I wish to address the council in the proper language of formal proceedings, said. We have translation devices, replied, still smiling. Speak in your native tongue. No, said clearly, I will speak in High. The chamber went silent. High was the ancient language of the used only for the most important official communications. Most citizens did not even speak it fluently. It was certainly not a language any human should know. Smile faltered. That will not be necessary. But I insist, replied, and then he switched to high. The words flowed from his mouth perfectly, every tone and inflection correct. I wish to ensure there is no confusion in what I am about to say. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The delegates sat forward in their seats, shock on their faces. The other species looked confused, waiting for an explanation. Silver Skin had turned pale gray. How do you know that language? The same way we know everything else about you, said, still speaking in high. We have been listening. For 5 years, we have monitored every transmission, decoded every message, and studied every aspect of civilization. The chamber erupted in noise. Delegates shouted questions. Stood, his 4 eyes wide with disbelief. Impossible, said. Your technology cannot. Cannot what? Interrupted. Cannot break your encryption, cannot understand your language, cannot observe you without being detected. He smiled coldly. You are correct. Our technology 5 years ago could not do those things, but we learned. While you treated us like children, we were studying you like scientists study an interesting specimen. Dr. Park activated the broadcast system from Earth. Suddenly, every screen in the chamber lit up with data, intercepted communications, decoded messages, recorded conversations. 5 years of secrets laid bare for the entire galaxy to see. On the 15th day of the 3rd cycle, Admiral told his fleet commanders that 40% of ships are not combat ready, said, reading from one message. On the 22nd day, Counselor complained in a private message that the Empire's economy is failing, and they need to extract more resources from younger species to survive. His face had gone from gray to almost white. This is espionage. This is a violation. Of what? Demanded. We signed no treaty promising not to listen. You installed monitoring equipment on our world without our permission. You restrict our development while claiming it is for our benefit. You treat sovereign species like property, and you thought we were too stupid to notice. More data flashed on the screens. Personal messages between officials mocking the species they were supposed to be guiding. Military reports showing the fleet was old and poorly maintained. Economic analyses proving the Empire was in decline. Here is my favorite, said, pulling up a specific message. This is from himself, sent to the High Council 3 months ago. He read aloud. Humanity remains docile and grateful. They are too primitive to suspect our true situation. We can maintain control indefinitely with minimal effort. The chamber was completely silent now. Every species was staring at who stood frozen at his seat. You were wrong, said quietly. We were never docile, we were learning. Every time you explained something in simple terms because you thought we could not understand complexity, we were recording it and studying the real version. Every time you broadcast communications you thought we could not decode, we were breaking your encryption. Every time you underestimated us, we were getting smarter. Ambassador stood and joined on the floor. For 5 years, humanity has played the role you assigned us. We bowed our heads. We said thank you. We pretended to struggle with concepts we had already mastered. And the entire time, we were building a complete intelligence picture of the Empire. On the screens, Sora Bay's technical analysis appeared. Diagrams showing ship vulnerabilities. Charts demonstrating their outdated weapons systems. Comparisons proving their technology had not improved in decades. You have been coasting on reputation, continued. Using fear and condescension to control species you claim to guide. You told us we were too young, too primitive, too dangerous to be trusted with advanced technology. But the truth is that you were afraid. Afraid that if we developed independently, we might surpass you. A delegate from another junior species stood. She was from a species that had been under supervision for 20 years. Is this true? Have you been deceiving all of us? Tried to speak, but no words came out. We have evidence from 7 different sectors, said. They have been manipulating younger species for their own benefit while claiming to protect us. They take resources, restrict development, and maintain control through lies. Another screen appeared, this one showing psychological profiles that Doctor had developed. Analysis of behavior patterns, predictions of their responses, assessments of their weaknesses. We know how you think, said, looking directly at. We know your fears, your strategies, your limitations. We have studied you more thoroughly than you have ever studied us, and we are done being treated like children. Stepped forward. Earth hereby demands the following: immediate removal of all monitoring stations from our space, full autonomy in our technological development, equal status in all council proceedings, and a formal apology for 5 years of patronizing treatment. And if we refuse, finally managed to say, though his voice shook. Then we release all of this data to every species in the galaxy, replied. Every lie, every manipulation, every secret. We will show the entire civilized universe exactly how weak the Empire really is, and then we will see how long your control lasts. The chamber erupted again. Junior species were shouting demands. Senior species were calling for order. The delegates were arguing among themselves. Raised his hands for silence. When the noise died down, he looked at with something that might have been respect mixed with fear. You have learned well, said quietly. Yes, agreed. We have. The question is, what will you do now that the children have grown up? Across the galaxy, other junior species were watching the broadcast. They saw humans standing up to the. They saw proof that the Empire was not as powerful as it claimed. They saw that resistance was possible. The Empire's comfortable control over younger species began to crack, and it started with humans who had been quiet, patient, and underestimated. The student had just taught the teacher a lesson. 6 months after the revelation, Director Lee sat in a conference room that had once been impossible to imagine. He was at a table with and representatives from 12 other species, not in the council chamber where they looked down from above, in a neutral meeting room where every seat was at the same level. The monitoring stations around Earth have been dismantled, said stiffly, as requested. As required, corrected gently. Let us be precise with our language. His 4 eyes narrowed, but he nodded. The ambassador looked older now, tired. The revelation had shattered his world. The empire he had served with pride had been exposed as a declining power clinging to control through manipulation. What else does Earth demand? Asked the counselor. Demand is such an ugly word, replied. We prefer to discuss what a true partnership would look like. The first weeks after speech had been chaotic. 3 junior species had immediately demanded the same treatment as Earth. They had tried to maintain order, but their authority was broken. Everyone had seen the intercepted messages. Everyone knew the truth. Some officials had wanted to respond with force, send the fleet to remind younger species of their place. But Admiral, whose private complaints about the fleet's condition had been made public, had quietly informed the council that such an action would be suicide. Half our ships cannot fight, he had admitted in a closed meeting that was, of course, intercepted by human intelligence. If we attack Earth and lose, the Empire collapses completely. So instead, they had been forced to negotiate. The delegate, a sharp-eyed woman named, leaned forward. Our species wants the same agreement Earth is getting, full autonomy and equal council status. As do we, said the representative. And us, added the delegate from Myra Prime. Looked around the table at faces that were no longer respectful and submissive. They were determined, demanding, equal. The council will consider, began. No, interrupted. The council will agree, or we release the next data package, the one that shows exactly how many resources they have extracted from our worlds under the guise of guidance. Closed his eyes, very well. Over the following months, the galaxy reorganized itself. The strict hierarchy began to break down. Junior species formed their own coalition, sharing the intelligence techniques that Earth had developed. Found herself teaching cryptography to students from 6 different species. They gathered in a facility on a neutral station, learning the same methods she had used to crack encryption. The key is patience, explained. They thought we could not break their codes, so they became lazy. Always assume your enemy is smarter than they appear. Her students nodded, taking notes. Some of them were already better at this than had been at their age. The younger species were hungry to learn, eager to prove themselves. Minyu ran a similar program for intelligence gathering. Former junior species who had been monitored by the were now learning to monitor back. Information is power, Minyu taught. Not weapons, not ships. Information. Know your adversary better than they know themselves. Engineer Sora Bay led joint technology projects. Humans and others working together to develop new systems. Without restrictions, innovation accelerated rapidly. Look at this, Sora showed her team. They have developed a power source that is twice as efficient as anything they use. They have a propulsion system that could revolutionize space travel. We each have strengths. Together, we are formidable. They watched all of this with growing unease. Their empire was not destroyed, but it was changed. They were no longer the unquestioned leaders. They were senior partners in a coalition of equals. Some accepted this gracefully. Admiral, surprisingly, became one of humanity's strongest allies. He had been humiliated by having his private complaints made public, but he was also pragmatic. The old system was failing, he told during a private meeting. We all knew it, but no one wanted to admit it. Perhaps your revelation was necessary. Perhaps, agreed, but it was not done to help you, it was done to free us. I know, Sid, and I respect that. Others were less accepting. A faction formed that resented the younger species and wanted to restore the old order. They plotted in secret, planning ways to regain control. But their secret communications were intercepted by S network. Their plots were exposed before they could act. The who wanted to return to the past learned that the past was gone. Captain became Earth's first ambassador to the reformed Galactic Council. He sat in a seat that was level with all others, representing humanity as an equal. Ambassador, a counselor said during his first official session, you have proven quite adept at intelligence gathering. How can we be certain you are not still spying on us? Smiled, you cannot be certain, just as we can never be certain you are not monitoring us. This is the nature of relations between sovereign powers. We trust, but we verify. The counselor looked uncomfortable, but nodded. The truth was that Earth had never stopped its intelligence operations. The observation network that had been built in secret was now maintained openly. Humanity monitored everyone, and everyone knew it. But other species were doing the same. They had developed their own surveillance capabilities. They were sharing intelligence with Earth. The galaxy was full of eyes and ears, all watching each other. It was messy and complicated and sometimes tense, but it was also honest. No one species could dominate through deception anymore. In a training facility on Earth, spoke to a new class of intelligence officers. They were young, bright, eager to serve. 5 years ago, they arrived and treated us like children, began. They assumed we were too primitive to understand their world. They were wrong, but they made that mistake because we let them think we were helpless. She pulled up images from those early days. Humans bowing to officials, Earth's leaders accepting patronizing lectures, the monitoring stations being built in orbit. We could have fought back immediately, continued. We could have refused their terms, but we chose a different path. We chose to appear weak while we became strong. We chose to seem ignorant while we learned everything. The students listened intently. That is your most important lesson, said. Never assume silence means ignorance. Sometimes the quietest student is learning the most. Sometimes the person asking simple questions already knows the answer and is testing you. And sometimes the species that bows its head is really studying your weaknesses. She paused, looking at each student. Learn this lesson the hard way. Make sure you never forget it. At the reformed Galactic Council, new rules were written. No species could restrict another's development. No species could install monitoring equipment without consent. No species could claim authority without earning it. They maintained respect as an elder species, but it was respect given freely, not demanded through fear. They shared their knowledge, and others shared in return. Technology advanced faster than it had in centuries. Director Lee retired from intelligence work. He was 70 now, gray and tired, but satisfied. He had spent his career protecting Earth, and he had succeeded beyond what anyone thought possible. On his last day, Captain visited him. "You did it," said. "You beat them without firing a shot." "We beat them by being smarter," corrected. "We beat them by being patient. We beat them by never accepting that we were lesser, even when we pretended to." "What happens now?" asked. Smiled. "Now humanity stands as an equal. Now we explore, we grow, we build. But we never forget how we got here. We never forget that knowledge is power and underestimation is an opportunity." Years later, children across Earth learned about first contact in their history classes. They learned about the arrival, the years of surveillance, and the revelation that changed the galaxy. But the most important lesson was not about technology or intelligence gathering. It was simpler than that. Never accept someone else's assessment of what you are capable of. Never let someone else define your limits. And never assume that because you are young, you are also foolish. They had treated humanity like children. They had learned too late that these children had been watching them the whole time, taking notes, learning lessons, growing up. And once grown, those children had no intention of ever being small again. The galaxy was changed forever because one species refused to stay in the box they had been placed in. Because they chose to watch, to learn, and to wait for the right moment to prove they were equal. The era of unquestioned dominance was over. The era of true galactic cooperation had begun, and it all started because humanity knew how to listen.